Saturn enters Aries on February 13th, and yes, that is Friday the 13th. And that's very fitting because Saturn is entering into its fall, meaning Saturn is entering into a realm where it is very difficult for everyone to navigate. Saturn in Aries embodies two different types of energies on two opposite ends of the spectrum. You have Saturn's energy, which is dedicated, structural, slow, and pace. You have the Aries energy, which is quick, impulsive, enterprising, and passionate. So, combining these two energies together, you're not really going to know which direction you should be taking. Should I be taking the structural, slow route, or should I be going fast? Nonetheless, this is the energy where excuses stop working. It's about accomplishing your goals. Over the next 2 years, the area of your life that is ruled by Aries is going to demand discipline, structure, action, and accountability. No more waiting, no more planning forever. The action starts now. The efforts start now. Follow me because I'm going to be breaking down exactly what this means for each and every astrological sign. I am very clearly going to tell you where the pressure and the payoff shows up in your life. Like this video, comment your rising sign or any major Aries placements in your birth chart. Aries, step to the front, child, child, child. We got a problem. Saturn is entering into the realm of your identity. And this is not going to be an easy feat. It opens up a 2 year cycle. And this for you, Aries, is essential because now is the time for you to become who you keep saying you are. Talk turns into proof, and potential turns into responsibilities. This is where we have to be dedicated, y'all. Saturn moves into Aries and it starts a long restructuring of your confidence, direction, and personal authority. Like I said, this is a 2 year cycle, so this is going to come in phases. But before we talk about what's to come, let's talk about what already happened. Last year, Saturn entered into Aries for the first time in 30 years on May 24th. So, what I'm going to need you to do is go back to your camera rolls, look at what you were doing about May through July of 2025, because that would have been the start. You likely had a reality check around your image, your future vision, your friendships, or your role in your communities. At this time, things around your values, self worth, money, and priorities were exposed. How you think and talk about your value came into focus. Then Saturn went into retrograde July through August. And this is where either the consequences or correction showed up for you. Things might have started to blow up in your face a little bit. Then after that, things cooled off because Saturn left Aries. Now, February 13th and forward, the energy returns and it stays. Your identity, your standards, and your social positioning come back under review. You may feel pressure around where you belong, what you're worth, and how you show up around others. The pressure is not punishment, it is construction. This is where excuses get replaced with structure. This is where self doubt gets replaced by discipline. And this is where your identity stops being an idea and starts being a lifestyle. Taurus, Saturn is entering into your inner world and your subconscious habits. This starts a 2 year cycle of you facing what you typically avoid. This is where you get to finally be honest with yourself. Saturn enters Aries and it begins a long internal restructuring. This is about your hidden fears, desires, dreams, your private habits, and the quiet behaviors that shape your outcomes. Before we really talk about Saturn and Aries in 2026, let's talk about Saturn and Aries in 2025 because that would have given you insight as to what you're going to experience for the next 2 years. So, you know the deal. Go to your camera rolls. Saturn went into Aries May 24th of 2025. So, look at your camera roll from May of 2025 to July of 2025 because I'm going to tell you what was happening back then. You likely had a reality check on your long term direction. This would have been around your career, your ambitions, your goals, your reputation, your finances, your self worth, and your material goals. Themes around how you value your work, your reputation, and your personal power were exposed. July through August, Saturn went into retrograde in Aries. And this energy would have shown you where your approach needed correcting or adjustments. Then after that, Saturn left Aries, went into Pisces, and things would have gone a little bit quiet. But the lesson did not go away, it just matured in the shadows. Now Saturn returns. And the lessons that you were supposed to learn, that I hope you learned last year, now become more serious and more deep. Again, your long term direction, your career, your goals, your ambitions, influence, your power comes back under a microscope. And you may start to feel pressure around what it is that you're focusing on, especially as it relates to your pride and your ego. This time, you are meant to move with intention, not impulse. You are being redirected to take ownership of your growth. Watch for coincidences because there's no such thing. That's actually your guidance. Your next 2 years is going to be about spotting your ways of self sabotage and replacing it with discipline and structure. My advice to you is to build discipline in private, the kind that nobody sees. That's the discipline that is going to create real success for you. Your private work is going to create public strength, and the discipline you build right now in private will prevent future public breakdowns. Gemini, your social circle and your long term vision are about to get filtered. Saturn in Aries kicks off a 2 year cycle where your future plans and your friendships get restructured for purpose. Saturn moves into Aries on February 13th, 2026 and stays there until April 24th of 2028. This is going to start a grounded rebuild of your community and your long term goals. But before we focus on that, let's talk about the first time Saturn went into Aries, and that was last year on May 24th of 2025. So what I want for you to do is go to your camera roll, look at your pictures, look at your videos, refresh yourself of what you were doing back then, because I am going to tell you what you were experiencing and how to link into now. Back then, you likely faced a reality check around your long term life direction. Your beliefs, your spirituality, your worldview, travel, higher education were all highlighted for you. You also got a closer look at your dreams and your desires, and how your social life or group connections were either distracting you from or helping you towards those goals. July through August, Saturn went into retrograde in Aries. So, this is where the corrections came, and things may have felt like they were kind of blowing up in your face a little bit. These things were not punishments, these were corrections and alignment. After August, things may have quieted down because Saturn exited Aries and went into Pisces. However, the lesson was sitting and brewing, it did not disappear. Now, February 13th, Saturn returns back to Aries. So the lessons, the themes now become more firm because Saturn stays there. Your hopes, wishes, dreams, your social communities, your social habits all come back under review. Now, growth may feel a little bit challenged because fantasy, avoidance, or mixed emotions are going to be exposed, typically where you let them run the show. This is your moment to use what you learned back in 2025 to navigate these lessons. This is where you're being pushed to be truly honest with yourself about where it is that you want to go and who actually fits in that future. The coincidences that show up are not coincidences, they are your signs and your synchronicities. Pay attention. Not every friendship or connection is going to survive this season, and that's a good thing. Let your distractions fall away. Build your vision on intention and not convenience. Strong alliances need to replace scattered networks and people that don't support your vision. Cancer. Saturn is zeroing in on your long term direction. This kicks off a 2 year cycle where leadership, accountability, and grown up decisions are no longer optional. They are required. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th and it stays in Aries until April of 2028. This is where your ambition gets tested. But before we talk about Saturn entering into Aries in 2026, let's talk about Saturn entering into Aries in 2025 because that would have been a preview of what you're going to experience over the next 2 years. So, you know the deal. Go look at your camera rolls, look at your videos, look at your pictures. Remind yourself of what you were doing May through July of 2025 because I'm going to tell you what you were experiencing and how to link it to now. That period probably brought insight around your long term goals, your career, your ambition, your reputation, the power that you have, your influence. And you may have faced endings, change, had to leave some things behind, and face some uncomfortable truths. Your hidden habits around self sabotage and avoidance as it relates to your long term direction and what keeps you from growing there were exposed. Then, July through August showed you the consequences of your actions as it relates through May through July. This was not a punishment, this was a correction. Then, after that, things cooled off, but the energy did not disappear, it just kind of matured in the shadows. Fast forward to February 13th, Saturn is back in Aries. Your long term goals and ambitions are back under the microscope, especially how they relate to your bigger vision, future plans, and social alliances. Expect a little bit of pressure around changing directions, releasing outdated goals, and transforming who it is that you align with. You are going to be in a pruning phase. So take what you learned from 2025 and apply it to now. Watch the coincidences that happen in your life because there is no such thing as a coincidence. These are signs and synchronicities. The right people will show up through education, spiritual practice, cultural learning, travel, and even a second life partner. The next 2 years are going to teach you how to choose alignment over access and quality over popularity. Stop chasing titles and start chasing purpose. This is your time to step into leadership, but build it around meaning and not your ego. Leo, your beliefs and your worldview are getting a reality check. This starts a 2 year cycle where study, discipline, and lived truth replace optimism and wishful thinking. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th and will be there until April 2028. And this is your advanced course in truth and commitment. But before we go into 2026, let's take a look at Saturn and Aries in 2025 because that would have been a preview for you. So you know the deal. Go to your camera rolls, look at your pictures, look at your videos, remind yourself of what you were doing around May through July of 2025 because I'm going to tell you what was happening back then and how to associate it with what's happening now. Back in 2025, you would have faced a jarring change around your spirituality, your philosophies, your worldview, your ethics. This is also travel and higher education. Your partnerships, commitments, deep bonds, relationships, marriages were a part of this trigger. There was a line drawn between what it is you say you believe and what it is you actually commit yourself to. Then July through August of 2025 would have shown you the results of the decisions that you made May through July. So this would have been consequences or alignment, but these would have been corrections for you. After that, things would have went quiet because Saturn would have returned back to Pisces in retrograde. However, the lessons still remained. They matured in the shadows. Fast forward to February 13th. Saturn is back in Aries. This time around, things are going to be louder and more serious. Your beliefs, your philosophies, your worldview, ethics, all of the things that I said before are back under review. especially as it relates to what it is you commit yourself to long term. You may feel tension around your relationships, commitments, legal matters, business ties, or anything you made a promise for the future. The point here is growth requires structure, not charisma. This time, you're expected to move with intention and not impulse. This is your time to be for real. Watch out for signs and synchronicities that come by way of coincidences. There's no such thing as a coincidence. These are your signs. And these signs for you, Leo, are going to point you to your subconscious habits. These are hidden patterns that quietly sabotage your growth. This is your time to fix them. Stop spewing out ideas and start building expertise. Study what matters and train your mind. The more you learn and apply these lessons, the more your life will be upgraded over the next 2 years. Virgo, your shared resources and emotional contracts are going to get real. This kicks off a 2 year cycle where shared money, debt, intimacy, and power dynamics get cleaned up and made solid. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th of 2026, and it'll be there until April of 2028. This is about trust and vulnerability. But before we talk about 2026, let's talk about 2025. Saturn entered Aries in May of 2025 and was there until July before it hit retrograde. So go back to your camera rolls, look at your pictures, look at your videos, remind yourself of what you were doing back then, because I'm going to connect the dots of what was happening back then to what it is you should be doing right now. Back then, you would have had a wake up call around your shared resources, emotional bonds, endings, your sexuality, and your karmic ties. Your routines, your work life, your independence, your habits, your health and vitality were also tied to that. You were shown where your daily choices support your long term direction and where they quietly worked against it. July through August would have been a course correction for you. There would have been some adjustments to that energy. For some people, this may have felt like things were blowing up a little bit, but the point was to align you with what it is you were supposed to be doing. Then after that, things kind of softened because Saturn went into Pisces. However, the lessons still remained. They just matured in quiet. Now, fast forward to February 13th, Saturn is back in Aries, and this comes with more accountability. Your shared resources, your debt, intimacy, sexuality are all back under a microscope, especially as it relates to your habits, your work, health and vitality, and your independence. Growth now requires structure around how you share, give, borrow, merge finances, and trust. You cannot be vague here. Pressure may show up around changing routines or how it is you express yourself in independence. The pressure is shaping you. Watch out for coincidences because there's no such thing as a coincidence. These are your signs and synchronicities. Pay attention to the people and partnerships that naturally align to your deeper goals and your future vision. Those are signals and not accidents. The next 2 years are going to be a masterclass in adaptation and emotional maturity. Upgrade your mindset around what it is you're willing to risk for your growth. Build trust with structure, not just your feelings. Your partnerships and commitments need a smarter strategy and honest agreements. Libra, your relationships are entering into a commitment era. This begins a 2 year cycle where the weak bonds will crack and shatter, and the real bonds will get stronger. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th and will be there until April of 2028. So, this era is going to be where your relationships reach a maturity point. But before we talk about what happens in 2026, let's talk about what happened in 2025 because that would have been a preview. So, what I need you to do is go to your camera roll, look at your videos, look at your pictures, remind yourself of what was happening around May through July of 2025 because I'm going to tell you what was happening back then and how to associate it with what's happening now. Back in 2025, you likely saw some energy bubble up in your life around relationships, commitments, partnerships, marriages, and open legal contracts. Your self expression, entertainment, dating life, your ways of creativity, and even entrepreneurship also was in the mix as well. Growth for you would have looked like you needing to release someone or something, outgrowing a relationship or a connection, or simply change how you showed up romantically. July through August would have been a period of reflection and alignment or consequence, depending on the decisions that you made May through July. Now, this is when Saturn went into retrograde in Aries and retrograded back to Pisces in August. Okay, so the energy would have went silent after that. However, the lessons were maturing in the shadows. Now, let's fast forward to February 13th when Saturn re enters Aries. Your relationship themes return back into the spotlight. Your commitments, your partnerships, your marriages, your legal matters are back under review, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship, how you express yourself, your entertainment, and your dating life. You may feel tension around change in your dating life or your creative expression, but that pressure is pushing you to build a healthier structure. This round of life asks you for intentional commitment, not impulsive attachment. Boundaries and devotion must exist together. Chemistry is not enough. Pay attention to your signs and synchronicities that come along as coincidences. You will see more of these as you adjust your routines and your habits around your relationships. The next 2 years are going to be a masterclass of committing smarter, not faster. Get serious about who you choose and how you choose them. It's time for you to drop the fantasy version of a partnership and start building a structural one. Scorpio, your routines and healthy habits are tightening up. This begins a 2 year cycle where your daily routines become power moves and not suggestions. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th and will be there until April of 2028. But before we talk about the energy that's going to be happening in 2026, let's talk about what happened in 2025 because that was your preview. You know the deal. Go to your camera rolls, look at your videos, look at your pictures, remind yourself of what you were doing May through July of 2025. Because I'm going to tell you what was happening back then and how to associate it with what's happening right now. You likely saw a change within your healthy routines, your daily life, your work, your independence, your duty, and the structure of your day. Your home life, your family matters, a nurturing parent, sense of security, or living situations would have been in the mix as well. And in this moment in 2025, growth for you would have looked like leaving behind patterns of comfortability, things that kind of were stunting your growth. July through August would have shown you what happens when you stay consistent or what happens when you avoid the work. That is when Saturn went into retrograde in Aries, and it would have been a time of reflection for you. After that, things would have went a little quiet because Saturn would have retrograded back into Pisces. The lessons were not finished, they were maturing in the shadows. Now, fast forward to February 13th, Saturn is back in Aries, and your habits return to the spotlight. Your routines, your health choices, and daily systems are being measured against your need for security and stability. You may feel a little tension between comfort and commitment, especially as it relates to your relationships and your deep bonds. The tension that you feel is a signal to push through. This era of Saturn is about building healthy habits around the life and the love that you say you want. My advice to you is to cut chaotic schedules and anything that leeches on your energy. Better routines will create better partnerships and better alliances. Be steady in how you show up and watch the quality of your relationships rise. The point here is to structure your time before your body forces you to. This is where your habits become a healing path. Sagittarius, fun gets serious and creativity gets trained. This begins a 2 year cycle where practice and consistency turns passion into mastery. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th, and it'll be there until April of 2028. But before we talk about 2026, let's talk about 2025 because that's where it all started. You know the deal. Go to your camera roll, look at your videos, look at your pictures, remind yourself of what you were doing around May through July of 2025 because I'm going to tell you what was popping up back then and how to associate it with what's happening now. May through July, you likely had a reality check around your dating life, entrepreneurship, how you express yourself, your creativity, entertainment, and even children. Your mindset, communication style, learning patterns, and decision making were also in the mix. There was exposure around your habits and routines and how they directly impact your long term relationships, marriages, partnership, business partnerships, and your deep bonds. July through August would have shown you the direct result of how seriously you took that push in May through July. It would have been alignment and reflection. After August, things may have quieted a bit. The lesson did not finish or stop, it just matured in the shadows. Now, on February 13th of 2026, Saturn re-enters Aries, and your creative life comes right back under review. Your self expression, entertainment, dating life, creativity, hobbies, entrepreneurship, all as it relates to your mindset, your perception, your communication around that, all gets put under a microscope. You may feel a little friction around your thinking patterns and your creative life, and this is just really to show you that scattered efforts won't cut it anymore. This is about intentional creation, not scattered efforts. Inspiration without commitment goes nowhere. Talent without repetition stays average. Pay attention to your signs and synchronicities. There is no such thing as a coincidence. So if something feels very coincidental, that is your sign. Now, this is going to be popping up for you around your internal comfort, your literal home, your family, a nurturing parent, or what you feel as secure. These synchronicities will point you towards creative discipline. The next 2 years will be about turning your passion into a repeatable process. Stop chasing sparks without structure. Raw talent is just not enough anymore. Creative discipline is what produces lasting joy and real results. Capricorn, your foundation is under construction. This begins a 2 year cycle where old foundations are dissolved and new foundations are built with intention. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th, and it'll be there until April of 2028. But before we talk about what happens in 2026 and forward, let's talk about what happened in 2025 because that would have been the beginning. So, you know the deal. Go to your camera rolls, look at your videos, look at your pictures, remind yourself of what you were doing May through July of 2025 because I'm going to tell you what was happening back then and how to associate it with what's going to be happening right now. In 2025, you likely faced a reality check around your home, your sense of security, your comfort, family dynamics, privacy, or emotional safety. Your money, self worth, and personal resources were directly tied to that story. Your habits, routine, independence, and even your creative and dating life exposed where instability was costing you. July through August showed you the results of the decisions that you made May through July. So for some people, this would have been alignment and positive things. For others, this would have been corrections and it would have felt like some things was blowing up a little bit. After that, the intensity eased, but that doesn't mean that the lesson was over because fast forward to now, Saturn re-enters Aries on February 13th. So now your foundation comes back under review. Home, comfort, real estate, and emotional security are now being measured against your finances, your resources, values, and material management. Pressure shows up where pleasure spending, dating patterns, creative risks, or child related responsibilities conflict with your financial reality or self worth. This is not punishment, this is structural correction. Inner stability is the real goal here. Not the image of security, but the structure. of security. Pay attention to those coincidences, those meaningful coincidences, because there's no such thing as a coincidence. These are your signs and synchronicities. This will come through your long term bonds, your deep connections, partnerships, marriages, relationships. And alignment will improve as soon as your mindset around security changes. Build a base that actually supports your gifts. Tighten your money habits. Say what you are building, then prove it with consistent action. You're defining what safety is in a grown way. Emotional stability is built brick by brick, not wish by wish. Aquarius, your voice and your thinking patterns are going to mature. So begins a 2 year cycle where scattered thoughts turn into focused discipline. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th and will be there until April of 2028. But before we talk about what's happening in 2026, let's rewind it back to 2025 because that's where it all began. Now, you know the deal. Go to your camera rolls, look at your pictures, look at your videos, remind yourself of what you were doing May through July of 2025 because I'm going to tell you what was happening back then and how to associate it with what's happening now. Back then, you likely had a reality check around how you communicate, how you speak, your logic, how you learn, how you process information, and your perception. Your identity, your attitude, ego and pride, appearance, and personal direction also was tied into that. Your creative risks, your dating patterns, self expression, sense of security and comfort exposed where thinking was immature or inconsistent. July through August, when Saturn went into retrograde, would have been a reflective and alignment period, depending on the decisions that you made May through July. Now, for some people, this may have felt good if you were in alignment. For others, it would have felt like things were blowing up a little bit because you would have gotten corrections. Then, after that, things kind of eased up a little bit because Saturn retrograded back to Pisces. The lesson was not over, it was just maturing in the shadows. Now, as we make our way back to 2026, Saturn re enters Aries. Your communication and your thought patterns come back under review. How you speak, write, learn, and decide now impacts your identity and your emotional security. You're going to feel a little bit of pressure around egoic reactions, defensive thinking, or careless words because that's going to disrupt your peace and your private life. This phase demands intentional thinking and precise communication. Your communication skills are directly tied to your inner security. Your loose words will create chaos. Your clear words will create structure. Pay attention to the signs and synchronicities. There is no such thing as a coincidence. So if something seems very coincidental, this is your sign. And this is going to come through improved routines, habits, and practical skill building that increases your self worth. This is a masterclass on mental discipline and message control. Stop speaking before you think. Treat your words like tools, not impulse. Your voice is gaining weight and responsibility. Use it like it matters. Pisces, your finance and value systems are getting disciplined. This starts a 2 year cycle where spending, earning, and pricing yourself gets real and structural. Saturn enters Aries on February 13th and will be there until April of 2028. But before we talk about what happens in 2026, let's talk about what happened in 2025 because that's where it all started. So, you know the deal. Go to your camera roll, look at your pictures, look at your videos, remind yourself of what you were doing May through July of 2025 because I'm going to tell you what was popping up back then and how to associate it with what's happening now. You likely had a reality check around your resources, your money, your finances, lending, borrowing, your self worth, or your material desires. Your material priorities were exposed. Your comfort, your security, even your home, and your logic and perception around that also was in the mix. July through August showed you how your choices that you made May through July were either in alignment or not. If you were in alignment, then things would have been pretty positive in this period. If you were not in alignment, things would have felt like they were blowing up in your face a little bit. Then the pressure would have eased after August because Saturn would have retrograded back to Pisces. However, the lesson was not over. It was just maturing in the shadows. Now in 2026, we pick that lesson right back up. Saturn re enters Aries, and your finances, your material desires, your possessions, your self worth all comes back under that microscope. This time, your thinking patterns, your perception, your logic, your hidden habits around avoidance and confusion are all going to be a part of this test. If your mindset is foggy, your money is going to be foggy too. At this point, mental discipline directly affects financial security. Disciplined thinking creates financial structure. The more your priorities are clear, the easier it is for you to make financial decisions. Watch out for the signs and synchronicities. If you find yourself coming into a coincidence, there is no such thing. That is a sign and a synchronicity. And this is going to come through your creative focus, your self expression, and what you choose to build and produce. Your talents are going to point you towards skills that can make you money. The next 2 years is going to be taking your abilities and making them profitable. My advice is to track your money, price your time and your skills with intention. Your worth needs to be based on value, not just feelings. Security for you comes from structure, not hope. Be purposeful in what it is you build.